The blizzard hit the Colorado mountains like the wrath of God himself, turning the world white in the span of 20 minutes. And Rose Harrigan knew she was going to die alone in this God-forsaken train station at the age of 23 if the snow did not stop soon. She clutched her worn carpet bag closer to her chest, her fingers numb despite the thin cotton gloves she wore. The mountain train station was hardly more than a wooden shack perched on the side of the pass, meant only as a brief stopping point for the Denver and Rio Grande Railway on its route through the Rockies. The train had deposited her here 3 hours ago, with promises of another engine coming through within the hour to take her down to the valley. That was before the sky opened up and the world disappeared behind a wall of white. The station keeper, an old man with rheumy eyes, had abandoned his post the moment the first flakes began to fall, muttering something about his cabin 2 miles down the mountain. Rose had been too proud to beg him for help, too accustomed to making her own way in the world. Now she sat on a hard wooden bench in the unheated waiting room, watching her breath form clouds in the frigid air and wondering if pride was worth freezing to death over. The door burst open with such violence that Rose screamed, scrambling to her feet. A man stumbled through, so covered in snow he looked like a walking snowdrift. He kicked the door shut behind him with his boot, and for a moment they simply stared at each other, two strangers caught in the same trap. "Jesus," the man breathed, shaking snow from his coat. His voice was rough, deep, the kind that carried across open plains. "You alone here?" Rose nodded, finding her voice. "The station keeper left. Are you from the train?" "Train's not coming." He stomped his feet, trying to restore circulation. "I was riding through the pass when this hit. Saw the light from here. Horse threw me about a quarter-mile back. Had to let her find her own way down." He was tall. Rose could see that even with him still hunched against the cold. As he removed his hat and beat it against his leg, she caught sight of his face in the dim lamplight. Hard, planed features, a strong jaw dark with several days of stubble, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked to be in his late 20s, weathered by sun and wind in the way of men who spent their lives outdoors. "I am Rose Harrigan," she said, because manners persisted even in crisis. "From St. Louis originally. I was heading to Denver for a teaching position. Nathan Crawford." He moved closer to the lamp, which provided the only meager warmth in the station. "Cowhand. Was working a ranch near Leadville until the owner sold out. Heading to Kearney, Nebraska to see if my brother still has work for me." The mention of Kearney felt like a small connection, though Rose had never been there. Her aunt lived in Omaha, just 100 miles east. The geography of strangers, she thought, the way people grasped at any thread of familiarity in unfamiliar circumstances. "How long do you think this will last?" Rose asked, though she suspected he knew no more than she did. Nathan moved to the window, peering out at the white nothing beyond. "Could be hours, could be days. These mountain storms, they blow in fast and sometimes they settle in like they plan to stay forever." He turned back to her. "You got food in that bag of yours?" Rose shook her head. "I ate the last of my bread at noon. I thought I would be in Denver by supper. I got some jerky in my coat. Not much, but it is something." He patted his pockets, producing a wrapped bundle. "We should take stock of what we have. Going to be a long night." The practical statement, delivered without panic or false comfort, steadied Rose more than reassurances would have. She had spent the last year on her own since her mother's death, and she recognized a fellow survivor when she saw one. Nathan Crawford was the kind of man who assessed situations and acted, who did not waste energy on wishing things were different. Together, they inventoried their resources. Nathan had jerky, matches, and a knife. Rose had a spare dress, a shawl, 2 books, and the $30 sewn into the lining of her bag. The station itself offered little beyond the bench, a pot-belly stove with no fuel, and a desk with some old railroad schedules. "We need wood," Nathan said. "That stove is the difference between uncomfortable and dead. I saw a woodpile around back when I came in." "You cannot go back out in that," Rose protested. "You can barely see 3 feet ahead." "Then I will not go more than 3 feet from the building." He was already buttoning his coat back up. "Got rope?" Rose shook her head, but Nathan was examining the room with that same practical eye. He yanked down the old canvas shade from the window, testing its strength. "This will do. You hold one end, keep it taut. I follow it back." Before Rose could argue further, he had secured one end of the canvas strip to the door handle and pressed the other end into her hands. "You feel 3 hard tugs, you pull me back. Understand?" His eyes met hers, and Rose saw no bravado there, just the calm determination of a man doing what needed doing. She nodded, wrapping the canvas around her hands. Nathan disappeared into the blizzard. The wind tried to rip the door from Rose's grip, but she braced herself and held firm. The canvas went taut in her hands, and she counted her heartbeats, each one seeming to stretch longer than the last. She had known this man for perhaps 15 minutes, but the thought of him disappearing into that white void made her chest tight with anxiety. Minutes crawled by. Rose's arms ached from holding the canvas steady. Just when she was certain something had gone wrong, the canvas jerked 3 times in quick succession. She hauled on it, hand over hand, and Nathan materialized out of the snow like a ghost becoming solid. He carried an armload of wood, ice already forming in his dark hair. "There is more," he gasped, dropping the wood by the stove. "But that is all I can carry at once." 3 more times he went out, and 3 more times Rose pulled him back, until they had enough wood stacked beside the stove to last through the night and into the next day if they were careful. On the last trip, Nathan returned with something else clutched under one arm. "Found these hanging inside the woodshed," he said, presenting her with 2 wool blankets, musty and moth-eaten but blessedly thick. "Station keeper must keep them for emergencies." With the wood gathered, Nathan set about building a fire in the stove. His hands were steady despite the cold, arranging kindling with the expertise of someone who had built 1,000 campfires. Soon flames were crackling, and blessed heat began to radiate into the small room. Rose found herself watching his hands, competent and scarred, the hands of a working man. Everything about Nathan Crawford spoke of capability, from the way he moved to the economy of his speech. She wondered what had brought him to cowhand work, wondered about the brother in Kearney, wondered if he had people who worried about him. "You should sit close to the fire," Nathan said, interrupting her thoughts. "Get yourself warm. Your lips are blue." Rose had not realized how cold she had become until she tried to move and found her legs stiff and unresponsive. Nathan caught her elbow when she stumbled, guiding her to the floor near the stove where the heat was strongest. "Thank you," she managed through chattering teeth. "For the fire, for staying. Where else would I go?" His voice held a hint of humor. "Besides, my mama would rise from the grave and box my ears if I left a lady to freeze alone. Your mother sounds like she was a formidable woman." "She was." Nathan settled on the floor across from her, stretching his long legs toward the heat. "Raised 4 boys on a hardscrabble farm in Kansas after my father died. Taught us all to shoot, ride, and read scripture. She would have liked you." "How do you know?" Rose asked, surprised by the statement. "You did not fall apart when I came through that door. You did not cry or demand I fix everything. You just got to work doing what needed doing." He pulled out the jerky, dividing it into careful portions. My mama always said the measure of a person is how they act when things go wrong. They ate the jerky slowly, making it last. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and finding every gap in the walls to send icy fingers creeping through. But the fire burned warm, and with food in her stomach and heat seeping into her bones, Rose felt something unknot in her chest. "Tell me about St. Louis," Nathan said. "I have never been east of Kansas City." So Rose talked, describing the crowded streets and brick buildings, the mighty Mississippi and the constant press of humanity. She told him about her mother's boarding house, how they had catered to traveling salesmen and railroad workers, how she had learned to cook for 20 and keep accounts before she was 15. She spoke of her mother's long illness, the medical bills that consumed everything, the boarding house sold to pay debts. The teaching position was supposed to be a new start, she said quietly. A chance to build something of my own. Will they hold it for you when you arrive late? I do not know, I hope so. I have nowhere else to go. Nathan was quiet for a moment, feeding another log into the stove. My brother's ranch, it is not fancy, but he always needs help. If the teaching does not work out, you could come to Kearney. His wife would appreciate another woman around, I expect. She gets lonely with just cowboys and cattle for company. The offer, made casually but with genuine sincerity, touched something deep in Rose's heart. This stranger, this cowboy who owed her nothing, was already thinking of ways to help her. It had been so long since anyone had shown her such simple kindness. "That is very generous," she said. "I will keep it in mind." Outside, the storm intensified. The wind sounded like tortured animals, and the snow piled against the windows until the glass was completely obscured. Inside their small circle of firelight, Rose and Nathan continued to talk, trading stories like currency, building understanding out of words. Nathan told her about his childhood on the Kansas farm, the endless work and the simple pleasures. He spoke of learning to rope calves from his oldest brother, of breaking his first horse at 14, of the day he decided to head west to find his fortune in cattle country. His stories were lean and spare, but Rose heard the affection in them, the deep roots that still connected him to family, even though he had been wandering for years. "Why did you leave?" Rose asked. "If you loved the farm, too many sons, not enough land." "My oldest brother inherited what there was. The rest of us had to make our own way." He shrugged. "I do not regret it. I have seen country that would take your breath away. Mountains so high they scrape the sky, plains so wide you could ride for days and never see another soul. I have worked with good men and a few bad ones. I have learned what I am made of." "And what are you made of, Nathan Crawford?" He looked at her across the fire, and something passed between them, some recognition that went beyond words. "I guess we will find out, won't we? This storm is going to test us both." As if to emphasize his point, a tremendous gust of wind slammed into the station, making the whole building shudder. Rose gasped, and without thinking, Nathan moved around the fire to sit beside her, his solid presence a comfort against the fury outside. "We are safe enough," he said. "This old station has weathered worse, I would wager." But he did not move away, and Rose did not ask him to. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly into his shoulder, drawn by the warmth and the strange sense of safety this near stranger provided. They talked through the evening, their conversation ranging from the profound to the trivial. Nathan wanted to know about her books, so Rose described the novels she carried, one about the court of Queen Elizabeth and another about a governess who married her employer. He laughed at her descriptions, admitting he had read little beyond the Bible and agricultural manuals. "Read to me," he said impulsively. "It has been years since anyone read to me. My mama used to before she died." So Rose retrieved one of her books and began to read aloud, her voice steady in the firelit gloom. Nathan listened with his eyes closed, his expression peaceful despite their dire circumstances. When her voice grew hoarse, he took over feeding the fire while she rested. Somewhere in those long hours, as the storm raged and the fire crackled, and the words flowed between them, something shifted. Rose became aware of Nathan in a way that had nothing to do with survival, and everything to do with the way his voice rumbled in his chest when he laughed, the gentleness in his rough hands when he draped a blanket around her shoulders, the intelligence in his eyes when he asked her questions about her life. Night deepened. They rationed the wood carefully, keeping the fire burning but not wasteful. When Rose shivered despite the flames, Nathan suggested they share the blankets. "Nothing improper," he said quickly. "Just practical. We can keep each other warmer than we can manage alone." Rose knew she should refuse, knew what people would say if they ever learned she had spent the night in a strange man's arms. But propriety was a luxury for people who were not freezing to death in a mountain blizzard. She nodded, and Nathan arranged the blankets around them both, sitting with his back against the wall and Rose tucked against his side. The warmth was immediate and wonderful. Rose relaxed into Nathan's solid presence, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. His arm came around her shoulders, holding her close but not constraining her. It was the most intimate she had been with a man since her father had died when she was 12, and yet it felt entirely natural, as if they had known each other far longer than a handful of hours. "Tell me about your brother," Rose said softly, wanting to keep talking to stay awake and aware. "Thomas. He is 5 years older than me, stubborn as a mule and the best horseman I have ever seen. He went to Nebraska 8 years ago, bought land cheap, and built it into something solid. Married a woman named Margaret, has 2 little ones now. I have not seen them in 2 years. Nathan's voice held a note of longing. I kept meaning to visit, but there was always another job, another season, another reason to stay where I was. You miss them. I do. When you spend years drifting, you forget what it feels like to belong somewhere, to have people waiting for you to come home." Rose understood that feeling intimately. Since her mother's death, she had been utterly alone in the world, her only remaining aunt too poor to take her in. The teaching position had represented not just employment but the possibility of community, of building new connections. "Maybe this storm is a blessing in disguise," she said. "Maybe it is pushing you toward where you are supposed to be." Nathan's hand rubbed her shoulder absently, a comforting gesture. "Maybe it is giving me something I did not know I needed." Rose's heart beat faster. She tilted her head to look up at him and found him already gazing down at her. The firelight cast shadows across his face, softening the hard lines, making him look younger and somehow vulnerable. "Rose," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "Yes. I know we just met. I know this is crazy. But I feel like I have been looking for you my whole life without knowing it." The words should have frightened her, should have seemed like the ravings of a man made foolish by crisis. Instead, they resonated with something deep in her chest, a recognition that matched what she had been feeling since he walked through that door. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I do not understand it, but I feel it." Nathan's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin with infinite gentleness. "I am just a cowhand with $30 to my name and a borrowed horse somewhere out in that storm. I have no right to ask you for anything." "Then do not ask. Just tell me what you are thinking." "I am thinking that I want to keep you safe. I am thinking that the idea of you going on to Denver alone makes me want to punch something. I am thinking that I have faced down stampedes and outlaws and never felt fear like I feel at the thought of losing you before I even really have you." Rose reached up to cover his hand with hers, pressing his palm more firmly against her face. I am thinking that I have been alone for so long, I forgot what it felt like to have someone care. I am thinking that you are the first good thing that has happened to me in over a year. I am thinking that I do not want to lose you either. They stayed like that, suspended in the moment, while the storm screamed around them and the fire painted them in gold and shadow. Then Nathan leaned down and Rose tilted up, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and searching and full of a promise neither of them could name but both of them felt. When they finally drew apart, Rose was trembling, and it had nothing to do with the cold. Nathan pulled her close again, tucking her head under his chin, and she felt his heart hammering against her ear. "We should rest," he said, his voice rough. "We both need our strength. I am not sure I can sleep. Then just rest. I will keep watch. You need to rest too." "I will, in a bit. For now, let me hold you and make sure the fire keeps burning." Rose wanted to argue, but exhaustion was pulling at her, the adrenaline of fear finally giving way to the deep weariness of emotion and exertion. Wrapped in Nathan's arms, warmer than she had been in hours, she let her eyes drift closed. She woke once in the deep night, disoriented and confused. The fire had burned low, casting barely enough light to see by. Nathan was asleep, his head tilted back against the wall, his arms still wrapped securely around her. His face in repose looked peaceful despite the rough stubble and the lines of hard living. Rose studied him, this stranger who had become something precious in the span of hours, and wondered what morning would bring. Carefully, trying not to wake him, she reached out and added another log to the fire. The flames caught, brightening the room. Nathan stirred but did not wake, and Rose settled back into his embrace, letting the rhythm of his breathing lull her back toward sleep. The second time she woke, pale light was filtering through the gaps around the snow-covered windows. The storm's fury had diminished to a steady whisper of wind. Nathan was already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. "Morning," he said softly. "Storm's breaking." Rose sat up, immediately missing his warmth. Her body was stiff and sore from sleeping on the floor, but she was alive and whole. They were both alive and whole. Against all odds, they had made it through the night. "Let me check outside," Nathan said, standing and stretching. He moved to the door, wrestling it open against the snow that had piled against it. Cold air rushed in, but it lacked the vicious bite of the previous day. Nathan stood in the doorway, surveying the world beyond. "Must be 3 feet of snow out here," he reported. "But the sky is clearing. I can see blue to the west." Rose joined him at the door, gasping at the transformed landscape. Everything was buried in white, the familiar shapes of the world softened and strange. The rail lines were completely invisible, the tracks filled in as if they had never existed. "When do you think the train will come?" she asked. Nathan shook his head slowly. "Not for days. They will have to clear the tracks, and that is slow work in snow this deep, and there is no guarantee they will even try until they know the storms have passed for certain. So we are still trapped. For now." He turned to her, taking her hands in his. "Rose, I meant what I said last night. All of it. I know circumstances are extreme, and maybe when we get back to civilization you will feel different, but I need you to know that what I feel is real." Rose squeezed his hands, her heart full. "What do we do? I have a teaching position waiting, or I hope I do. You have your brother expecting you. Our lives were heading in different directions before yesterday. Then we changed direction." Nathan said it with such simple conviction, as if rerouting a life was no more complicated than choosing a new trail. "Come with me to Kearney. Marry me. We will build a life together, you and me." "Nathan, that is crazy. We have known each other less than a day." "I know." and if you need time, I will give it to you. But Rose, I am 30 years old and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I have spent my whole adult life drifting, never finding a place that felt like home. Then you are here, and suddenly I understand what I have been looking for. It was not a place. It was a person. Tears pricked Rose's eyes. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was madness, that people did not fall in love in a single night, that she should proceed with caution and good sense. But her heart, that wild and reckless thing, was already reaching for what Nathan offered. I feel the same, she admitted, and it terrifies me. It terrifies me too, but I would rather be terrified with you than safe and alone. Rose laughed, the sound emerging half-sob. That is possibly the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Nathan grinned, that rare expression transforming his serious face. Give me time, I will come up with better lines. You have time. I am saying yes. For a moment, Nathan just stared at her, as if he could not quite believe what he had heard. Then he whooped, a joyous sound that echoed in the small station, and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her again, deeper this time, a kiss full of promise and passion and the wild joy of finding something precious when you had stopped looking for it. Rose kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressed close to his. They broke apart breathless and grinning, and Nathan rested his forehead against hers. We should figure out how to get off this mountain, find a preacher, start our lives. All of that sounds wonderful, but first, I need to write to Denver and withdraw my acceptance of the teaching position. It would not be fair to leave them waiting. You do not regret it, giving up what you planned. Rose thought about it seriously, wanting to be sure of her answer. The teaching position had represented safety, independence, a chance to use her education and support herself. Those were not small things to surrender. But the life Nathan offered, uncertain as it was, held something the teaching position never could: love, partnership, the possibility of true belonging. I do not regret it, she said firmly. Plans change. Dreams change. This feels right in a way nothing has felt right since my mother died. They spent the morning making plans, their voices excited and overlapping as they imagined their future. Nathan described his brother's ranch, the rolling prairie land, and the small but growing town of Kearney. Rose talked about what skills she could bring, her experience running a boarding house, her education that could help if they ever had children to teach. We will need our own place eventually, Nathan said. Thomas has land, but he cannot support us forever. I have some savings, and with both of us working, we could build something. I have $30, Rose offered, and I can sew, cook, take in laundry if needed. We will manage. Around midday, they heard a sound that made them both freeze, voices calling in the distance. Nathan grabbed his coat and pushed back outside, Rose following close behind. A group of men on snowshoes was approaching from down the mountain, led by the same station keeper who had abandoned Rose the day before. Anybody in there? The old man shouted. Train company sent us to check after the storm. 2 of us, Nathan called back. Both fine. You got a way to get us down. The men reached the station, puffing and red-faced from the climb. The station keeper looked shamefaced when he saw Rose alive and well. Begging your pardon, miss. I thought you would have sense to come down with me when the storm started. She had sense to stay put and not freeze to death wandering around in a blizzard, Nathan said sharply, and Rose felt a warm glow at his defense of her. The men had brought supplies and snowshoes. They reported that the train tracks would not be clear for at least 4 or 5 days, maybe longer. But they could guide Nathan and Rose down to the nearest town, a small mining settlement called Silver Ridge about 5 miles down the mountain. "We can go today?" Rose asked. "If you are up for the walk. It is rough going in this snow, but the weather is holding." Rose and Nathan looked at each other, a wordless communication passing between them. They were being offered escape from their trap, a return to the world and all its complexities. Rose felt a pang of something almost like loss. In this small station, cut off from everything, their feelings had been simple and clear. Out there, reality would intrude. As if reading her thoughts, Nathan took her hand and squeezed. "Nothing changes," he said quietly. "Out there or in here, I am still yours if you want me." "I want you," Rose said, not caring that the other men could hear. "Today, tomorrow, always." One of the younger men let out a low whistle. "Well, that storm certainly brought you too close." "Watch yourself," Nathan said mildly, but there was steel underneath the words. The man subsided, grinning. It took an hour to prepare for the journey. Rose repacked her carpetbag, making sure her precious books and money were secure. Nathan banked the fire carefully, a habit too ingrained to break even though they were leaving. The men fitted them both with snowshoes and warned them that the walk would be exhausting. They set out in the early afternoon, moving in single file through the deep snow. Rose had never worn snowshoes before, and the strange, waddling gait they required made her legs burn within minutes. Nathan stayed close behind her, offering encouragement and catching her elbow whenever she stumbled. The world was blindingly bright, sunlight reflecting off endless white. Rose squinted against the glare, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. The beauty of the landscape was almost painful. Sharp peaks against blue sky, trees so heavy with snow they bent like bowing courtiers, air so clean and cold it hurt to breathe. An hour into the journey, Rose's legs were trembling with fatigue. She had not eaten a real meal in over a day, and the energy required to push through the snow was immense. Nathan noticed her flagging and called for a rest, ignoring the impatient looks from some of the other men. "Drink some water," he urged, passing her a canteen one of the men had brought. "We can take our time. They will wait." Rose drank gratefully, then passed the canteen back. "I am sorry for slowing everyone down. You are doing fine. Most city women would have given up by now." "I am not most city women." Nathan's smile was warm with pride and affection. "No, you certainly are not." They continued on, and Rose found new reserves of strength. She had survived her mother's death, survived poverty and loneliness and uncertainty. She could survive a walk through the snow. Especially when the man she loved was right behind her. His presence, a constant reassurance. Silver Ridge appeared as the sun was beginning to lower in the west, a ramshackle collection of buildings clustered in a narrow valley. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the sound of a piano drifted from what was presumably a saloon. To Rose's exhausted eyes, it looked like paradise. The men led them to a boarding house run by a formidable woman named Mrs. Chen, who took one look at Rose's exhausted face and Nathan's protective stance and drew her own conclusions. "Caught in the storm, were you? Poor dears. I have a room for you both and hot food if you want it." "2 rooms," Nathan said quickly. "We are not yet married, madam, Mrs. Chen's eyebrows rose, but she nodded approvingly. "2 rooms, then. Though I will say I have seen the way you look at each other, and you had best find a preacher sooner rather than later." She showed them to adjacent rooms on the second floor, small but clean, with real beds and warm quilts. Rose nearly wept at the sight. Mrs. Chen promised hot water for washing and a meal in an hour, then left them alone in the hallway. "I should let you rest," Nathan said, though he made no move to enter his own room. "I do not want to rest. I want to make sure this is real, that you are real, that I did not dream everything that happened." Nathan reached out and drew her close, and Rose went into his arms as if she belonged there, which she supposed she did now. I am real. This is real. And tomorrow we are going to find a preacher and make it official if you are still willing. I am willing. I am so willing it probably makes me foolish. Then we will be foolish together. They stood there in the narrow hallway, holding each other until Mrs. Chen called up that the hot water was ready. Reluctantly, they separated, and Rose went into her room to wash away the grime and exhaustion of the last 2 days. The hot water was heaven. Rose scrubbed her face and hands, then changed into her spare dress, which was wrinkled from the carpetbag but at least clean. She brushed out her long brown hair and pinned it up properly, trying to make herself presentable. When she looked in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized herself. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed, her whole face alive in a way it had not been in months. A soft knock came at her door. "Rose, are you decent? Come in." Nathan entered and Rose's breath caught. He had washed and shaved, the rough stubble gone to reveal the strong lines of his jaw. He had clearly borrowed a clean shirt from someone, and with his dark hair still damp and his gray eyes warm, he looked heartbreakingly handsome. "You are beautiful," he said simply. "You are not so bad yourself." He held out his hand. "Come on, let us get some food in you, then we can talk about tomorrow." The dining room was crowded with miners and railroad workers, but Mrs. Chen had saved them a small table in the corner. She brought out bowls of thick stew, fresh bread and hot coffee, and Rose fell on the food like a starving woman, which she supposed she was. Nathan ate with equal enthusiasm, and for several minutes they did not speak, too busy satisfying their hunger. Finally, Rose pushed back her bowl with a satisfied sigh. "I think that might be the best meal I have ever eaten." "Everything tastes better when you have earned it," Nathan agreed. He reached across the table to take her hand. "Rose, I have been thinking. We should send a telegram to my brother, let him know we are coming and that I am bringing a wife. That way he can prepare, and Margaret will have time to get used to the idea. Does it worry you what they will think? That you are showing up with a woman you barely know? Thomas will understand. He married Margaret after knowing her 3 weeks. My family, we tend to know what we want when we see it." Rose felt a flutter of nerves. "What if they do not like me? Impossible. You are kind, smart, brave, and you make me happier than I have been in years. They will love you because I love you." It was the first time he had said the words directly, and they hung in the air between them, precious and fragile. Rose felt tears well up, the good kind, the kind that came from joy too big to contain. "I love you too," she whispered. "I know it is too soon. I know it makes no sense, but I do. I love you, Nathan Crawford." His hand tightened on hers and his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Then tomorrow we make it official. Tonight we rest and thank God we are alive, and then we start our life together." That night, Rose lay in her small bed and stared at the ceiling, too excited and overwhelmed to sleep. Her whole life had changed in less than 2 days. She had gone from alone and uncertain to engaged to a man she loved with her whole heart. It was crazy, it was impulsive, and it felt more right than anything she had ever done. A soft tap came at her door and Rose knew it was Nathan without having to ask. She opened it to find him standing there in his borrowed shirt, looking uncertain. "I could not sleep," he said. "I kept thinking about how close we came to missing each other. If the storm had hit an hour earlier or later, if I had not seen the light from the station, if you had gone down the mountain with the keeper. But none of that happened. We found each other. I know. I just needed to see you to make sure you were real." Rose stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in. We can talk until we are tired enough to sleep." Nathan hesitated. "Rose, I do not want to compromise you. You are going to marry me tomorrow." I think my reputation can survive you sitting in a chair in my room for an hour." He came in, leaving the door slightly ajar for propriety's sake, and settled into the room's single chair while Rose sat on the bed. They talked in quiet voices about everything and nothing, making plans and sharing dreams until Rose's eyes finally grew heavy. "I should go," Nathan said, rising. "You need your rest." "Nathan, thank you for walking through that door yesterday. Thank you for being exactly the man I needed. Thank you for being here, for seeing past the rough exterior to what was underneath, for taking a chance on a wandering cowhand with nothing to offer but his heart." He bent and kissed her forehead gently, then left, closing the door softly behind him. Rose burrowed into the quilts, happier than she could remember being, and let sleep claim her at last. Morning brought clear skies and the news that a circuit preacher was in town, staying at the hotel down the street. Nathan went to speak with him while Rose helped Mrs. Chen with breakfast dishes, too nervous to sit still. "He is a good man, your cowboy," Mrs. Chen said, scrubbing a pot. "I can always tell. Some men, they have violence in their eyes, others have honesty. Yours has honesty. He is not mine yet, not officially. He has been yours since the moment he looked at you, child. Any fool can see it." Nathan returned an hour later, grinning. "Preacher says he can marry us this afternoon. I bought a ring from a jeweler down the street, nothing fancy, just a simple gold band, but I wanted you to have something." He produced a small wrapped package from his pocket. Rose unwrapped it with trembling fingers. The ring was indeed simple, a thin circle of gold, but to her it was more precious than any diamond. Nathan took it from her and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Marry me today, Rose Harrigan. Make me the happiest man in Colorado." Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married that afternoon in the tiny church at the edge of Silver Ridge, with Mrs. Chen and her husband as witnesses and the circuit preacher presiding. Rose wore her spare dress, which Mrs. Chen had pressed for her, and Nathan wore his own shirt, cleaned and mended. There were no flowers, no music, no guests beyond the few curious townspeople who wandered in. But when Nathan took Rose's hands and spoke his vows, his voice steady and sure, Rose felt the weight of his promise settle around her like a protective cloak. And when she said her own vows, meaning every word, she saw his eyes grow bright with unshed tears. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Nathan drew Rose close and kissed her softly, a kiss full of tenderness and new beginnings. Rose kissed him back, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This man, this good and honest man, was her husband now. They belonged to each other. The small congregation clapped, and Mrs. Chen dabbed at her eyes with her apron. The preacher completed the marriage certificate, which Nathan and Rose both signed along with the witnesses. It was official, legal, real. Mrs. Chen insisted on hosting a small celebration dinner, refusing to hear any argument. She roasted a chicken and made biscuits and even produced a small cake, somehow conjured from her pantry. The other boarders joined in, toasting the new couple with whiskey and well wishes. "To Nathan and Rose Crawford," one old miner proclaimed. "May they have long life, good fortune, and a dozen healthy children." Rose blushed, but Nathan laughed and pulled her close. "I will settle for a long life with this woman by my side. Everything else is just blessing on top of blessing." That night, finally, truly married, Rose and Nathan shared a room. They came together with a mixture of nervousness and desire, learning each other with gentle hands and whispered words. Nathan was patient and tender, making sure Rose felt safe and cherished. And Rose discovered depths of feeling she had never known existed, a connection of body and soul that left her breathless. Afterward, lying in Nathan's arms in the darkness, Rose felt a peace settle over her that had nothing to do with physical satisfaction and everything to do with finally being home. "I love you, Mrs. Crawford," Nathan murmured into her hair. "I love you, Mr. Crawford. Today, tomorrow, always." They stayed in Silver Ridge for 3 days, waiting for the railroad to confirm that the tracks were clear and trains were running again. Nathan sent a telegram to his brother, keeping it brief. "Married, bringing Rose home, arriving weekend. Nathan." The reply came back within hours. "Congratulations. Margaret excited. Room ready. Thomas." Those 3 days felt like a gift, a chance to be married without the weight of the world pressing in. They explored the small town hand in hand, visited the general store to buy Rose some practical items for ranch life, and spent long hours talking about their future. On the 4th day, they boarded a train heading east toward Nebraska. Rose pressed her face to the window, watching the mountains recede behind them, thinking about the storm that had changed everything. If someone had told her a week ago that she would be married to a cowboy and heading to a ranch in Nebraska, she would have thought them mad. But here she was, and she had never been more certain of anything in her life. The train ride took 2 days, with an overnight stop in Denver. They stayed in a modest hotel, and Rose felt a strange disconnect from the teaching position she had been so desperate to secure. That life, the one where she was alone and independent, seemed like a dream now. This was reality. Nathan's hand in hers, the gold ring on her finger, the future stretching ahead full of possibility. Kearney was smaller than Rose had expected, a prairie town of wide streets and false front buildings, surrounded by endless grassland. The train pulled into the station at dusk, and Rose felt her nervousness return. What if they hate me? What if Margaret thinks I am some opportunist who trapped you? Then we will prove her wrong, Nathan said calmly. But she will not think that. Trust me. A man who could only be Thomas Crawford stood on the platform, his resemblance to Nathan striking despite the 5-year age difference. Beside him was a pretty woman with blonde hair and a warm smile, holding a toddler on her hip while a slightly older child clutched her skirts. "Nathan," Thomas strode forward, pulling his brother into a fierce hug. "You old dog, I was starting to think you had forgotten about us." "Sorry it took so long." Nathan pulled back and turned to Rose, his hand at the small of her back. "Thomas, Margaret, I want you to meet my wife, Rose. Rose, my brother Thomas, and his wife, Margaret." Margaret handed the toddler to Thomas and came forward, taking both of Rose's hands in hers. "Welcome to the family, Rose. Any woman who can get this wanderer to settle down must be something special." Rose felt tears of relief prick her eyes. "Thank you for having me. I know this must be sudden." "Love does not follow a schedule," Margaret said warmly. "I should know. Thomas proposed to me on our second meeting, and we have been blissfully happy ever since." She linked her arm through Rose's. "Come on, let us get you home. I want to hear everything about how you two met." The Crawford Ranch was 5 miles outside of town, a sprawling operation with a neat house, a large barn, and extensive corrals. As they drove up in the wagon, Rose saw cattle grazing in distant pastures and horses in a nearby paddock. It was beautiful in a stark, open way, so different from the crowded streets of St. Louis. "We have the spare room ready for you," Margaret said as they climbed down from the wagon. "It is not much, but it is warm and private. When you are ready, we can talk about building you a place of your own, but there is no rush." The house was warm and welcoming, filled with the smell of cooking and the cheerful chaos of young children. Margaret shooed everyone to the table and served a hearty meal of beef stew and cornbread. Over dinner, Thomas and Nathan caught up on 2 years of separation, their affection for each other clear despite the teasing and rough humor. Margaret drew Rose into the conversation, asking about her life in St. Louis and her journey west. Rose found herself relaxing, charmed by Margaret's genuine warmth and the easy affection of the family. The children, 2-year-old Emma and 4-year-old James, were curious about their new aunt, and Rose let them inspect her with the solemn gravity of the very young. After dinner, while Margaret put the children to bed, Thomas took Nathan aside to talk business. Rose helped clean up, grateful to have something to do with her hands. "He really loves you," Margaret said quietly, washing dishes while Rose dried. "I can see it in how he looks at you." Thomas says Nathan has always been the restless one, never able to settle, but when he looks at you, he looks like he has finally found his place. "I love him too, more than I thought it was possible to love someone after knowing them such a short time. The heart knows what it knows." My mother used to say that the measure of a marriage is not how it starts but how it continues. Love is the beginning. Everything else is work, good work, but work nonetheless. "I am not afraid of work," Margaret smiled. "No, I do not imagine you are. Welcome to the family, Rose. I think you are going to fit in just fine." That night, in the small spare room that was theirs for now, Nathan held Rose close and talked about the future. Thomas had offered him a partnership in the ranch, contingent on Nathan working for a year to prove his commitment. "It is more than fair," Nathan said, "and it gives us a path forward. We work hard, we save, and in a year or two we can think about our own place. Thomas has more land than he can work properly. He would sell us a parcel at a good price." "It sounds wonderful. I can help Margaret with the children, take on some of the household work to earn our keep." "You are not a servant, Rose. You are family, but I know Margaret would appreciate the help. Ranching is hard on women. She gets lonely out here with just the children and Cowboys for company." The next morning, Rose woke to the sound of roosters and the distant lowing of cattle. She dressed quickly and went to help Margaret with breakfast, falling into a routine as if she had been doing it for years. She learned that ranch life meant early mornings and late nights, constant work, and the satisfaction of tangible accomplishment. Nathan threw himself into ranch work with an energy born of purpose. Rose watched him from the kitchen window, seeing how the other hands respected him, how Thomas relied on his expertise. This was what he had been born for, she thought. Not drifting from job to job, but building something lasting. The weeks turned into months, and Rose found her own rhythm on the ranch. She helped Margaret with cooking, cleaning, and minding the children. She started a small vegetable garden, putting her knowledge from the St. Louis boarding house to good use. She learned to ride a gentle mare named Daisy, venturing out onto the prairie with Nathan on Sunday afternoons. She also discovered she was pregnant, a realization that came with joy and terror in equal measure. She told Nathan on a cold November evening, 6 months after their wedding, and watched his face transform with wonder. "A baby. We are having a baby, in the spring, I think. April or May." Nathan swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests that he would make her dizzy. When he set her down, his eyes were wet. "I am going to be a father. Rose, you have made me the happiest man alive." "I am scared," Rose admitted. "What if something goes wrong? What if I am not a good mother?" "You will be a wonderful mother, and nothing will go wrong because I will be there every step of the way. We will figure it out together." Winter came hard to the Nebraska prairie, with snow and bitter cold that made Rose grateful for the solid house and the warmth of family. She spent the short days helping Margaret with preserving and mending, teaching young James his letters, and resting when the pregnancy made her tired. Nathan was attentive and protective, sometimes absurdly so. Margaret laughed at his hovering, but Rose found it touching. This man who had been a wandering cowboy was transforming into a husband and soon-to-be father, and he approached both roles with the same quiet determination he brought to everything. Christmas came, and with it, a joy Rose had not felt since her mother was alive. Thomas and Nathan rode into town and came back with a small pine tree, which they set up in the parlor. Margaret and Rose strung popcorn and cranberries for decorations, and the children were beside themselves with excitement. On Christmas morning, Nathan presented Rose with a gift wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal and a pen. "For your thoughts," he said, "and for our child, so they can know the story of how their parents found each other in a blizzard." Rose clutched the journal to her chest, too moved to speak. That evening, while Nathan played with James and Emma, she made the first entry, describing the storm and the station, and the moment Nathan had walked through the door into her life. Spring came slowly, the snow melting to reveal muddy earth and the first hints of green. Rose grew round with the baby, and Margaret helped her sew tiny clothes and prepare for the birth. Nathan finished building a cradle, carving it from oak and polishing it until it gleamed. On a mild April morning, Rose went into labor. Nathan sent James running for the doctor in town while he paced the kitchen, looking like he might be sick. Thomas clapped him on the shoulder. "You will be fine. And Rose is strong. She will be fine too." The labor was long and hard, and there were moments when Rose was certain she could not endure another minute. But Margaret was there, holding her hand and encouraging her, and the doctor was calm and competent. And then, after what felt like forever but was really only 12 hours, a baby's cry split the air. "A boy," the doctor announced, placing the squalling, red-faced infant in Rose's arms. "Healthy and strong." Rose looked down at her son, overwhelmed by the rush of love that flooded through her. He was perfect, from his tiny fingers to his shock of dark hair. He looked like Nathan, she thought, and her heart swelled. "Can Nathan come in?" she asked Margaret. "Try to keep him out." Nathan burst into the room moments later, his face pale and his eyes wild with worry. But when he saw Rose sitting up in bed, tired but smiling, holding their son, all the tension drained out of him. "Rose, oh Rose, you are all right." "I am fine. We are both fine. Come meet your son." Nathan approached the bed like he was walking on holy ground. When Rose placed the baby in his arms, he cradled the tiny body with infinite gentleness, staring down in wonder. "He is so small and perfect. Rose, we made a person. We did. What should we call him?" They had discussed names over the winter but had not decided on anything definite. Now, looking at his son, Nathan said, "What about Henry? It was my father's name, Henry Thomas Crawford." "Henry," Rose repeated. "I like it. Henry Thomas Crawford, welcome to the world, little one." Those first weeks with a newborn were exhausting and wonderful. Rose learned to nurse, to soothe, to decipher the meaning behind different cries. Nathan helped as much as he could, walking the floor with Henry when he fussed at night, changing nappies with fumbling but determined hands. Margaret was an invaluable help, showing Rose the tricks she had learned with her own children. The two women grew even closer, their friendship deepening into something like sisterhood. As spring turned to summer, Nathan approached Rose with an idea. "Thomas wants to make the partnership official. He says I have more than proven my commitment. He is offering us 60 acres on the north pasture, enough to start our own herd and build a house. Our own place." Rose felt a thrill of excitement and nervousness. It would still be part of the larger ranch operation, but it would be ours. We could build it the way we want, make it a real home. What do you think? Rose looked around the small room that had been theirs for the past year, then down at Henry sleeping in his cradle. "I think it sounds perfect. I think it sounds like the future we have been working toward." They broke ground on the house in July, with Thomas and Nathan doing most of the building with help from the ranch hands. It was a simple structure, just 3 rooms to start, but it had large windows to let in light and a fireplace for heat. Nathan built it with his own hands, every board and nail a promise of permanence. By October, they moved in, their modest possessions filling the space and making it a home. Rose hung curtains she had sewn herself, arranged her books on a shelf Nathan built, and set up the kitchen the way she wanted it. Henry, now 6 months old and laughing more than crying, seemed to sense the significance, babbling cheerfully as Rose carried him from room to room. "What do you think, Henry? This is your home. This is where you will grow up." That first night in their own house, after Henry was asleep in his cradle, Nathan and Rose stood on the small porch and looked out at the land that was theirs. The prairie stretched away in all directions, endless and beautiful under a sky full of stars. "We did it," Nathan said, his arm around Rose's waist. "We built a life. We did, and it is better than anything I could have imagined." Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. "Rose, I know I have told you before, but I need you to understand. Meeting you in that storm, it was not luck or chance. It was providence. You saved me. I was drifting toward becoming a bitter old cowhand with nothing to show for my life but scars and stories. You gave me a reason to stop drifting. You gave me everything." Rose reached up to cup his face, her thumb brushing his cheekbone. "You saved me too. I was so lonely, Nathan, so scared. I thought I would spend my whole life alone, making my own way, never really belonging anywhere. Then you walked through that door and suddenly I had a home. Not a place, but a person. You are my home." They kissed under the stars, the same stars that had watched over them in that mountain station, and Rose felt the rightness of it all settle into her bones. This life they had built, this family they had created, it was exactly what she had been searching for without knowing it. The years that followed were full of the ordinary struggles and joys of ranch life. They had good seasons and bad, times of plenty and times of hardship. Rose had 3 more children, a daughter named Sarah 2 years after Henry, then twin boys, Jack and William, 2 years after that. The house expanded to accommodate the growing family. Rooms added on, until the simple 3-room structure became something more substantial. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, teaching his sons to ride and rope, reading to his daughter every night, never too tired or too busy to listen to their questions and dreams. Rose watched him with their children and fell in love with him all over again. This man who had been a stranger in a storm and became the foundation of her world. Margaret and Rose raised their children together, the Crawford Ranch becoming a place of laughter and chaos and deep affection. Thomas and Nathan worked the land side by side, their partnership strong and their brotherly bond unbroken by the stresses of shared enterprise. The journal Nathan had given Rose that first Christmas filled with entries, a record of their life together. She wrote about Henry's first steps, Sarah's first words, the twins' mischievous adventures. She wrote about hard winters and beautiful springs, about cattle drives and harvest dinners, about the quiet moments with Nathan that still made her heart race. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan took Rose back to Colorado, leaving the children with Thomas and Margaret. They rode the train up into the mountains and hiked to the little station where they had met, now abandoned and falling into disrepair. 10 years, Nathan said, standing in the doorway where he had first burst through into Rose's life. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, sometimes it feels like forever. Rose walked through the empty station, remembering the cold and the fear and the desperate hope. If someone had told me that night that this is where we would be a decade later, I would not have believed them. 4 children, a ranch, a life full of purpose and love. It seems too good to be true. But it is true. We made it true. You and me, Rose. We took a chance on each other, and look what we built. They spent the night in a hotel in the nearest town, and Nathan made love to his wife with the same tenderness and passion he had shown on their wedding night. In the morning, they rode the train back to Nebraska, back to their children and their land, back to the life they had created. More years passed. Henry grew into a tall young man with his father's quiet strength and his mother's quick mind. He left for college in Lincoln at 18, the first Crawford to pursue higher education, funded by years of careful saving. Sarah proved to have a gift with horses, training them with patience and skill that amazed even her father. The twins were inseparable, mirror images in looks and temperament, always into some scrape or another but good-hearted underneath. Nathan's hair grayed at the temples, lines deepened around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun, but Rose thought he had never been more handsome. He still made her laugh, still held her close at night, still looked at her sometimes with that expression of wonder that said he could not quite believe his good fortune. Rose, for her part, settled into her life with a contentment she had never thought possible. The girl who had sat alone in a freezing train station, certain she was going to die, seemed like someone from another lifetime. She had found her purpose in this family, this land, this life built on the foundation of a love story that began in a blizzard. When Rose was 45, Margaret died suddenly of a fever, and the loss hit them all hard. Thomas was devastated, lost without his partner of 25 years. Rose and Nathan took in his children, who were nearly grown but still needed family, and helped him through his grief. "Life is so fragile," Rose said to Nathan one night, holding him close. "One day everything is fine and the next everything changes. Which is why we have to cherish what we have while we have it," Nathan replied. "Margaret knew she was loved. Thomas knows he was loved. That matters." Thomas eventually found his footing again, though he never remarried. He threw himself into the ranch with renewed vigor, working alongside Nathan until the day he died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 70. By then, Rose and Nathan were grandparents many times over. Henry had become a lawyer in Lincoln, but visited often with his wife and children. Sarah married a neighboring rancher and gave them 3 grandchildren who spent every summer on the Crawford land. The twins took over management of the ranch, working it with the same dedication their father and uncle had shown. Nathan and Rose moved into a smaller house on the property, leaving the main house to Jack and his growing family. They spent their days in quiet contentment, tending a garden, reading together on the porch, watching the sun set over land they had worked for more than 40 years. On their 50th anniversary, the entire family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled every corner of the house and spilled out onto the lawn. There was food and music and laughter, and Rose looked around at all these people who existed because she and Nathan had found each other in a storm half a century ago. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, finding her standing alone for a moment on the porch. "I am thinking about that girl who sat in a freezing train station, certain her life was over. I am thinking about the cowboy who walked through the door and changed everything. I am thinking that if I could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, she would never believe it." Nathan pulled her into his arms, and despite the years and the gray hair and the aches of age, Rose felt the same flutter in her chest she had felt at 23. "I love you, Rose Crawford. I have loved you every day for 50 years, and I will love you for however many days we have left. I love you too. Thank you for walking through that door. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for building this life with me." They stood together as the party continued around them, 2 people who had become one through time and love and commitment. The blizzard that had trapped them together was long past, but the family they had become had endured, growing stronger with each passing year. Rose lived to be 87, her mind sharp and her spirit undiminished even as her body grew frail. Nathan, 2 years her senior, remained by her side every moment, holding her hand and reminding her of their story. When she died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Nathan felt the loss like a physical wound. He followed her 6 months later, his heart simply giving out one morning as he sat in the chair on the porch they had shared for so many years. The family found him there, a smile on his face, and they knew he had gone to find Rose. They buried them together on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built, under a stone that read simply, "Nathan and Rose Crawford, together through storm and sunshine, forever in love." Their great-grandchildren still work the land, still tell the story of the blizzard that brought their ancestors together, still marvel at the idea that a single storm, a single chance meeting, could create a legacy that spans generations. The little train station in the Colorado mountains is long gone, reclaimed by nature, but its ghost remains in family stories, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments lead to the best futures, and that love found in the darkest times burns the brightest. The Crawford Ranch endures, a testament to two people who took a chance on each other when they had every reason not to, who built a life from nothing but love and determination, who proved that family is not just who you are born to but who you choose, who you fight for, who you build with when the storms come and the world turns cold. And on winter nights, when the snow falls heavy and the wind howls across the prairie, the current generation of Crawfords gather around the fire and tell the story again, keeping alive the memory of a blizzard, a station, a cowboy, and a stranger who became a family by dawn and remained one for the rest of their days.